All right, y'all, how's it going? Okay, let's look at 97 today. It's called transversal. Anytime you see the word trans, that's Latin for across or through. Um, so we're going to look at a picture of what a transversal is. Well, let's just do it. This is a transversal, okay? A transversal, let's just say you get a couple of lines like this. That's a transversal. It cuts across the lines. Of course, there could be more lines like this, okay? They can be parallel, they can be unparalleled, or deparallel, or anti-parallel, or whatever word you want to use, okay? But this here, that is the transversal. It cuts across. When transversals cut across lines that are parallel, some interesting things happen, and we'll talk about those, okay? All right, look at this diagram, and if you need to draw a diagram of this, you can. You can look in your book as well. The exterior is this part, these angles right here. The interior angles are these, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The other exteriors are right here. And let's look at what happens geometrically when we look at these here. So corresponding angles. Well, here's what happens, okay? When this happens, when you have two lines that cut across a transversal, let's say transversal cuts across those two lines, and they are parallel to each other. We all know what parallel means. What happens is this. If these are parallel, this works. It doesn't work if they're not parallel. But if the lines are parallel that the transversal cuts across, then what will happen? This is what happens. This measure of angle, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, what happens is 1, 2, 3, 4 basically cookie cutter themselves right below to 5, 6, 7, and 8. So in other words, the measure of angle 1, since it's the top left, matches this 5. And the measure of angle 2 matches the 6. And the measure of angle 3 matches the 7. And the measure of angle 4, of course, matches the 8. Now, this is also true. When you have lines that cut across each other like this, in other words, they intersect, the opposite angles, like in other words, this one and this one, are congruent. So in other words, this angle is the same as this angle. Also, obviously, this angle is the same as that angle. All right. So in other words, we could look at this and go, well, these are both parallel lines. A transversal cuts across them, so we know that top left will equal top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, and so on. We can also say that 2 is equal to 4 because these are the two lines intersect and these right across from each other. All right. We'll deal more of those in geometry later on. So you could look at this and go, well, 1 is equal to 5, but also 1 is congruent to 7 as well, because since 1 is the same thing as 5 and 5 is the same as 7, you could say, oh, this is equal to 7. You could also look at 2 and say, well, we know 2 is equal to 6, but 6 is also equal to 8. So you could go, oh, okay, this is 2 and 8 are congruent as well. Same thing for 4 and 6 and 3 and 5 and so on, right? Okay, because we know that 4 is congruent to 8, and 8 is going to be congruent to 6, so 4 is congruent to 6, all right? Those are called alternate interior angles. We know that 3 is the same thing as 7, but we also look at 7 and go, oh, right across from there, it's congruent to 5. So we can say that 3 is congruent to 5, and 3 and 5 are called alternate interior angles. That's basically it, okay? So which one of these, your book has an example, are corresponding angles? Well, what corresponds with A? You tell me. Excuse me. A and E, right? Okay, B is corresponding to F. C corresponds to G. D corresponds to H. Excuse me, alternate interior angles. The interior angles, remember, are the ones in here. So the alternate interior angles are C and E and D and F. Alternate exterior angles would be B is the same measure as H. A is the same measure as G. Now you might go, wait, how do you know B is the same as H? Well, we know B corresponds to which angle down here? It's top right, so this is top right down here. Well, F we know is congruent to H, okay? And you can go, oh, well, so in other words, If B is congruent to F and F is congruent to H, well then B and H are exactly the same. And of course A would be congruent to which alternate exterior angle? G, right? Okay. The measure of A is 115 degrees. Oh, excuse me, I almost forgot. Don't forget that if you have two angles that are supplementary, in other words, A plus B, since that's a straight line, that's the same thing as saying that's two 90-degree angles together. So we know that A and B together will add up to 180 degrees. In other words, they're supplementary. That's the definition of supplementary. If that's true, of course, we also know that B and C are supplementary, right? They add up to 180. Of course, we also know that C and D add up to 180. Now, if you look at D and A, those two together are also 180. So you can just keep going all around. If the measure of angle A is 115 degrees, let's just look at that. Let's just call this 115 degrees. What are the measures of E and F? Well, let's take a look. Okay. Well, this is A corresponds to E, right? If A is 115 degrees, since it's top left, that's exactly what the measure of E is going to be. So we can go, oh, okay, that's also 115 degrees. Well, what's the measure of angle F? Well, what do E and F have to add up to? Since it's a straight line, 180, right? If you subtract 115 from 180, you get 65 degrees, which means that F is 65 degrees. Of course, since F corresponds to B, B will also be 65 degrees. And since B is a vertical angle from D, D is also 65, and so is H, and then G, you just keep going. So that's all. The thing you need to remember is, number one, W is a transversal. Number two, if X and Y are parallel and W cuts across it, then all these corresponding angles happen. That's it. That's the basic lesson of today. Okay, all right. Try the practice problem that you have on page whatever, and there are 5 of them, so pause it and give it a whirl. Okay, well, C is the transversal, okay, which is an alternate interior angle to 3. That's going to be 5, right? 3 and 5 will be congruent to each other. C, which angle corresponds to angle A? Well, that's 4. Okay, all right. 8 is the top left of its chunk. 4 is the top left of its chunk. D, which angle is an alternate exterior angle to 7? That'll be 1. 1 is congruent to 7. You can prove why, like we did just a minute ago. If the measure of angle 1 is 105, what's everything else? Okay, well, let's do this together. If 1 is 105, that's the top right. Let's just boom, boom, pretend those are parallel, all right? There is 105, all right? Well, let's see here. 2 is next. Let's just do that. Well, then this plus this is going to have to be 180, right? So that's 75, okay? Well, same thing is true from here to here. 75 plus this angle has to be 180, which makes it 105, which of course is the same thing. Again, these are called vertical angles if they're across from each other. This, of course, will be 75 as well. And then basically the whole thing copies. In other words, this will be 75, that's 105, and that's 105. That's all there is to it. Okay. All right. We'll mess with those a lot in the future, especially algebra, at the end of algebra 1 and beginning of algebra 2. So, all right. See you guys next time. Y'all take care.